Shabbat Shalom, family. Good to see you all here. Hope you're doing well. Well, a judge just ruled that Donald Trump's slush fund is dead. The judge said it is on pause indefinitely. So, look like Donald Trump is not going to be able to take this slush fund money and hand it out as reparations to the January Sixers. They don't deserve it anyway. They committed a criminal act. What are they getting money for? And number two, they shouldn't get anything before us. And whatever reason Donald Trump used to give them money, those are the reasons we need to use for our reparations. Because those folks have not gone through a damn thing that we have not gone through for the past 400 plus years. So you're just going to hear reaction to the judge's ruling on this in the videos that I'm about to show you. All right, hold on 1 second here. Make sure. Okay, I do have it. Please give me a 1 if you can see my screen. Thank you.
Talk about a judge rejecting a bid to halt the Trump administration's so-called anti-weaponization fund. I've got our Alex Mallon reporting from the Justice Department what this means for President Trump. Alex, before we get into the judge's decision, just catch us up to speed again. What actually is the fund and who can apply for it?
Yeah, so this was a fund that was created to settle President Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against his own government, arguing that he essentially had his tax returns stolen and leaked during his first term, and that was unlawful. The government ended up settling that in a really controversial move by creating this $1.776 billion settlement that they called an anti-weaponization fund that would be doled out by the administration's discretion in a 5-member commission to presumably allies of President Trump, including potentially those who engaged in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. It obviously came under a lot of Republican heat, and the administration ended up backing off. We heard the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche under a lot of fire. He's trying to seek confirmation now, and he actually told Congress during a hearing that the administration was no longer moving forward with that fund.
Yeah, Alex, so then why did the judge block the request to block this fund?
Yes, so multiple groups filed lawsuits before this fund was pulled back. This group, Crew, this oversight group, filed this lawsuit. They essentially said that they couldn't take the administration's word for it, and they wanted this judge to issue a permanent block against the administration doling out any of these funds. The judge in this case, Richard Leon in D.C., basically determined that he was going to take the administration at their word, that this was not going to be moving forward. But he did end the hearing with an admonition to the government's counsel saying, don't play possum with this court, essentially saying, don't make the representation that this fund is dead and then it suddenly becomes alive, because you will be in big trouble.
Yeah, Alex, you had mentioned that this is just one of many of the other legal challenges that this fund and the administration is facing. Where do those stand right now?
Yeah, well, we actually have another hearing tomorrow in Virginia in federal court, in a lawsuit brought by a former January 6th prosecutor and others who are suing to, and this was actually one of the orders that stopped this fund in its tracks before the administration was able to pull back. And then later tomorrow night, we have a filing due from President Trump's own lawyers responding to the judge that was actually previously overseeing the IRS lawsuit that resulted in this settlement. The judge in that case has ordered President Trump's lawyers to respond by midnight tomorrow night as to whether they committed a potential fraud against her court by engaging in what appears to be a collusive settlement that resulted in the creation of this fund, even though the administration is now backed off from going forward with that fund.
A federal judge has just blocked Donald Trump from setting up his $1.8 billion compensation fund for his supporters who broke the law on January 6th and elsewhere. Trump's people about a week ago said they were no longer going to proceed with the fund. Trump then repeatedly equivocated publicly and said, well, I'd still like to do it. Then there was a report this morning in the paper saying that actually they were going to do it secretly. They were looking for other ways to get the money to people, even if it wasn't officially this fund. Well, the judge said, I don't like that. So the judge blocked it today and said, you are not moving forward. She said she's willing to remove the block if the Department of Justice puts in writing under threat of perjury that they are not going to move ahead with the fund. Previously, the Attorney General refused to put anything in writing. He testified on the Hill and said, we're not going to do it. And they said, oh, put it in writing. He said, no. And they went, why? Because if it's in writing, it's perjury. So that's where things stand now. Hopefully this fund is dead forever. But again, according to today's paper, Trump and his people basically lied and publicly said they weren't going to do it. And then they were looking for ways to funnel the money to these people anyway. Just corruption, corruption, corruption.
A federal judge agreed on Friday to extend a court-ordered block on the Trump administration's creation and operation of a $1.8 billion settlement fund for compensating people who claim to be victims of a weaponized government. Earlier this month, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche told Congress that the government is scrapping its plans for the fund in the face of a fierce bipartisan backlash. Government attorneys have argued that lawsuits challenging the fund are now moot, but plaintiffs' attorneys aren't satisfied by Blanche's assurances that the fund won't move forward. Neither was U.S. District Judge Leonie Brinkema, who ruled that the Anti-Weaponization Fund will remain blocked until further notice from the court. Quote, the government's mootness argument, in my view, doesn't go anywhere, the judge said. Brinkema gave the parties a week to negotiate an agreement for Blanche to submit a sworn declaration that the administration won't revive the fund. Brinkema previously agreed to temporarily block the administration from proceeding with the fund for at least 2 weeks. Her May 29th order was due to expire on Friday. Trump Republican administration created the fund to resolve his lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service over the leak of his tax returns. Plaintiffs who sued to block fund payouts argue that the government can't legally divert taxpayer money into what they argue is a slush fund for compensating Trump's allies.
A federal judge has now indefinitely blocked the $1.8 billion fund proposed by President Trump to pay what he calls victims of government weaponization. This started when President Trump sued the IRS for $10 billion over the leak of his tax returns. He dropped the lawsuit, and the Justice Department, headed by Todd Blanche, his former personal lawyer, announced an out-of-court settlement. Now, in addition to the fund that Trump would control, it also permanently shields the Trump family from any IRS investigations. The announcement brought fierce bipartisan backlash over possible payouts to January 6 defendants. The president then said he was dropping the idea, but Trump administration attorneys have continued to defend it in court.
Trump's slush fund seems to be melting. Slowly and steadily, it's having trouble. Federal judge in Virginia, Lonnie Brinkema, has ruled that the administration has 1 week, to put in writing and prove that it's not moving forward with the $1.7 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund for convicted crooks, and to prove that it's not moving forward indefinitely. She wants it on paper. She wants it in black and white. She doesn't just want a verbal statement from Todd Blanche or his designated attorneys that things not moving forward. She wants proof. And unless there's proof, this thing's on hold indefinitely, at least for a week and potentially beyond. That's the latest threat to the $1.7 billion slush fund that has seemed endangered from the start, but which Republicans seem unwilling to kill in Congress. They had the opportunity earlier this month in the dark of night to vote on an amendment that would have crippled, if not stopped, the fund outright, and there were not enough Republican votes to do so, even though Republicans have said on the record they don't like the fund, they don't support it, and they know it's politically cancerous back home to use taxpayer money for convicted crooks when people can't afford the gas or the groceries. Another development imperiling the fund. A group of members of Congress, including Colorado Congresswoman Brittany Petterson and Colorado Democratic Senator Michael Bennet, have asked the Department of Justice and Treasury to submit to Congress a list of all January 6 defendants who've already applied for taxpayer-funded reparations for money out of this fund. They want the list of names, including others aligned with Trump, who've applied for the money. Congress will continue to exert some influence over this, trying to at least raise the profile of the issue, knowing voters hate the fund, Republicans don't like the fund, Democrats despise the fund, And until it's dead, the fund is on life support, but still alive.
Welcome to a breaking edition of Legal AF. We've got some breaking news coming out of the Eastern District of Virginia and Judge Brinkema's courtroom, where she heard argument today about whether she was going to extend her temporary restraining order to block the Jan 6th Anti-Weaponization slush fund or not. Was it mute? Because Todd Blanche got on with a congressional hearing and said out loud, it's dead on arrival. Yet Donald Trump is constantly talking about it not being dead on arrival. And so the parties have been battling it out with filings leading up to the hearing. There were amicus briefs that were filed by members of the Senate, including Cassidy and Cory Booker, that were accepted by the judge. Got late filings by both sides because coming into the hearing, another judge, Judge Leon, now known as the ballroom judge, he went the other way. He said, I'm not going to block the fund in a case brought by two Jan 6 officers because he thinks that Todd Blanche's comment was enough for him. And they tried to file that in this case to get Judge Brinkema to follow Judge Leon's lead. Fortunately, we have somebody that we're going to follow. We're going to bring in Adam Klasfeld, who is standing in front of the courthouse because he was there inside the room for the hearing, and will give us all the color of what went down against the Department of Justice.
And then it went downhill from there because she took out the hearing, the transcript of that hearing that you mentioned.
Wait a minute.
One win and two losses. That's what President Trump is dealing with today from the courts on three issues near and dear to his heart. So let's start with his win. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. said President Trump's 80th birthday UFC fight can continue on the White House lawn this Sunday. Two longtime D.C. residents sued the National Park Service, which of course oversees the White House grounds, over that UFC event, saying that the claw that was constructed on the South Lawn and all the events surrounding the fight at the Lincoln Memorial and along the mall are illegal because they were not approved by Congress and would significantly hinder their ability to visit these public spaces. They asked the judge to issue a temporary restraining order or an injunction to block the events from happening. But today, that federal judge said, no, those two Washington, D.C. residents have very thin arguments that do not qualify for either of those things. The judge said they failed to establish that they have any standing to even bring this case and did not prove a likelihood that they would be irreparably harmed by this UFC event. So Trump wins. Now, let's move on to his two losses, starting with the Kennedy Center. I reported in this video a federal judge said this, Trump's name, has to be removed from everything associated with the Kennedy Center. Not only the lettering on the building, but all the letterhead, the website, the social media handles cannot say the Donald J. Trump and John F. Kennedy Center. It can't say that anywhere. And the deadline to remove all that stuff was today, Friday, June 12th. Well, in a last-ditch effort, the Kennedy Center Board, which of course was appointed by President Trump, filed an emergency appeal to put a pause on the judge's order because, you guessed it, they don't want to take Trump's name off the building and off all of the social media channels. But today, the federal judge who is overseeing the case denied their appeal, saying they did not meet the requirements to block his ruling and they did not show they would suffer irreparable harm if they had to take Trump's name down. So now Trump's name needs to be off of that building and everything else by the end of the day today. Trump lost. And the last L for Trump today is in his attempt to create that $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund to financially compensate people who Trump believes were politically prosecuted by the federal government, which could possibly include January 6 rioters. Two separate federal judges are looking into the legality of this fund, one in Miami and one in Virginia. Now, after all the backlash, the Department of Justice told the courts that they killed the fund, that it's not happening anymore, so these lawsuits should just go away. But President Trump has not said on the record that he is giving up on the fund. So today, the federal judge in Virginia killed it for him. In this order, the judge said she does not believe the Department of Justice that the fund is dead. So she ordered Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to both file a declaration under penalty of perjury that they will not take any action to create or operate the Anti-Weaponization Fund, and that the Anti-Weaponization Fund will not proceed in any manner or under any name. That declaration needs to be filed with the court in 7 days. And of course, there is also a standing preliminary injunction blocking the Trump administration from moving forward with the fund at all. Trump lost. So if you want to read any of these 3 rulings for yourself, I'm going to email them all out to you tonight in my Facts HQ email, which of course is free. So make sure you sign yourself up.
Okay, y'all. So we know Donald Trump. He's definitely going to look for other ways to try to pay these very undeserving, mediocre people that should have just sat their ass down on January 6th. So anyway, y'all, for now, the judge said the pause on this fund is permanent, it's indefinite. But if he's looking for other funding and other ways, which I don't doubt, we're talking about Donald Trump. We are talking about Donald Trump. Then it's up to the courts to continue to block him and giving these people money. They have done nothing to deserve one dime of any reparations. So, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. Now, I do have another upcoming live. I have a couple of them. And let's see here. We have Bible study at 1:45. And I have another live where all these Asian businesses are relisting themselves as Black businesses. And people are catching on to what they're doing. So the ones that, some of them have already gone out of business because nobody is going in their shop. But there are some that are changing from an Asian business and they're just changing it to Black business, but it's still actually Asian owned. And I've even heard some stories online where they're hiring Africans to be behind the counter so that, it will trick people into going in and shopping in those stores, but the Asians still actually own it, but they're using the Africans as a front. And I'm not surprised that the Africans are going along with this, just like your docile asses. So that part I'm not shocked over. It's what I would actually expect from these Africans. So we will get into talking about that. And I think that's all I have lined up for today. So y'all have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat. And those of you that will be at Bible study, I will see you at 1:45. If I don't see you, have a wonderful afternoon. Shalom, family.